Okay, so over the next sort of 15 or minutes, I'll be sort of sharing sort of how I went from feeling like an expert, having supported engineering students for about 15 years, to switching to health sciences and medicine in 2020. So during that period of sort of being successful in the interview and then getting this role, initially it was sort of like, yay. And then it was like, oh, it's a very different cohort. So that sent me back to the literature. And I came across the concept of informed learning in relation to information literacy by Christina Bruce. So I'm going to talk a little bit about her theory and then talk about the importance of reflection as a strategy for bringing about learning. So both in terms of the way that the healthcare students and medical students are educated at Brunel, and also how that helped me. I'll give you a brief flavour of the workshop that I delivered and I'm building on, and just a bit of the outline and content. And finally, like a good academic librarian, there is a short reading list at the end if people want to find out a bit more. So I mentioned this theory of informed learning. So I went back to sort of literature, and Christina Bruce describes it as using information creatively and reflectively in order to learn. And this really spoke to me because I went from sort of feeling fairly confident in supporting engineering students and academics to a whole sort of broad subject area now. So within health sciences at Brunel, I support occupational therapists, social workers, physiotherapists, nurses, and medical students. And that made me think about how I search for information in my academic setting, what it might be like for personal sort of hobbies and interests, and other aspects of life, and also thinking about how my learning emerged, developed, varied depending on how I was searching for information and using it to learn about different topics. And my students were in a similar situation. So thinking about information literacy now and how informed learning sort of helped me to sort of frame my approach to teaching information literacy. So this approach focuses on people's information experiences. And I was really keen to understand how the students were searching for information prior to coming back to university, especially the sort of the health students who were on the Nursing Apprenticeship Nursing Associate Apprenticeship program. And I wanted to go beyond just trying to teach them a set of steps that they could replicate, because there was a lot of feeling of discomfort and emotion within these sessions, and also a feeling of, again, being experts already in their work context or very sort of experienced and confident, and then going through a period of discomfort and also a little bit of sort of stress and anxiety with people sort of struggling to get familiar with the different systems we have at Brunel. And it was very much a transition, but I wanted to start where the students were. So the key sort of message from reading Christina Bruce's research for me was that this sort of informed learning thus is simultaneously about information use and learning. So it spoke to me because I felt it's not just about acquiring information. I want to explore how people are learning within this process. So the main thing about this process is that this approach is that it recognizes the ways that we use information in various spheres of life, as I mentioned earlier. And the main thing is that it contributes to our overall understanding and learning process. Because I was going through this myself, little did the students know that I wasn't an expert in health sciences and medical information searching. I had the foundation, but I did have to develop my knowledge in this area. And it very much reinforced my experience that although I had those sets of skills, it was very much a dynamic and evolving process, both for me and my students. So reflective practice sort of plays a really big part in the teaching and learning in sort of a lot of healthcare programs, but especially at Brunel. And each assignment the students were working on, they had to find sort of the information, the academic research to support a particular topic they were researching. But there was always an element of how they would apply that in their work context. And also they had to do this period of sort of reflecting within each assessed piece of work. And they were introduced to a number of different theories of reflection. I'm not going to go into those, but just to give you a flavor of some of the things that would come up in the sessions, what went well, what went badly, how they might improve something next time. And this was also a basis of sort of the searching sessions that we had where we were looking for information. So Christina Bruce identifies sort of reflection as being sort of a fairly key element to this process of learning. And in my sessions, I had sort of the general information, sort of teaching people sort of information literacy, how to search for information, introducing them to, as a starting point, initially the sort of library, and then particular databases. We then sort of reflected on sort of what they'd learned. I got them to think about this and then how they might apply this information in different contexts. So if they were looking for information on researching a holiday or purchasing a new item, let's say, you know, a fridge or a TV or something else, and then sort of thinking about these skills as being sort of transferable. So this sort of a process of informed learning very much relies on reflection as a strategy for bringing about learning, which led me to think about my own experiences of searching for information. And around 2020, I sort of got very interested in sort of jogging. So I did the Couch to 5K, and then that made me very enthusiastic, very competitive with myself. So I started to look at fitness trackers. And I was thinking about sort of how I actually made a decision on purchasing one. And initially it was conversations with people I know, and I talked to them, you know, which model do you have, which brand, what's good about it, what's not. And then I went online and I searched for information, things like sort of newspaper reviews of fitness trackers, and also looking at the Which magazine reviews. Unlike sort of our normal academic processes, I thought, well, I didn't read any journal articles about this. You know, I was relying on a different type of information. So this was the kind of starting point for my session. I wanted to build on the Nursing Associate Apprenticeship students' previous experiences of using information to learn. And I thought I would use this topic of the fitness tracker, like what influences an individual to acquire and use one. And in my case, I don't use mine anymore. It's sort of gathering dust in a drawer. So that sort of just helped me to think about, did I want to get a new one? Why don't I wear one anymore? And so that was the basis of trying to find academic research to see if that could be borne out as well. So the aim of my sessions was to move away from a focus on locating information sources to make it simultaneously about information use and learning. So I mentioned earlier, I wanted to start where the students were in terms of their knowledge and their information-seeking behavior. And having reflected on sort of my own approach to looking at gadgets like these sort of fitness trackers, I thought I would take that as the topic for the session. So in this session with the Nursing Associate Apprenticeship students, I devised a short poll using Poll Everywhere and encouraged them to sort of feedback, you know, answer some questions on sort of where they might go to seek information on this topic. And because they were sort of a little reticent to sort of feedback initially, having anonymous polls really helped the process. And it was very informative for me because most people seem to, in this group, just watch videos. You know, there are sort of all these people online doing reviews of these fitness trackers. The second sort of answer that was sort of most prominent was that most people then may read a review. I mean, it wasn't always a newspaper, that's what I learned, but sometimes it was. And they really weren't thinking about the container or what information, how it came. It was just, I read an article. And thirdly, it was very much searching for a particular brand and sort of identifying information, reviews about it that way. I then got the students to sort of in small groups find and evaluate sort of 3 types of sources. So I thought, let's start with a video. And I found one of sort of these wellness influencers sort of promoting particular fitness trackers. The second item was to look at a fitness tracker, well, a review in a national newspaper. And finally, we did look at some academic research. So we looked at a journal article, and I asked students to find and evaluate that source as well. So once they'd identified the sort of first 2 sources, we then talked much more about sort of academic journal articles, and I sort of did a standard sort of talk about sort of the process of peer review and the publication process, and how we were looking in this instance, we wanted some not just qualitative sort of research, but quantitative as well. So how many fitness trackers are sold, how many people may be wearing them, and then also hopefully some interviews or focus groups, information that would be a bit deeper, telling us what sort of motivated people, what factors influenced them to adopt the fitness tracker. And we also talked a little bit about the language, sort of the difference in the language in the journal, the title of the journal article. So in summary, I felt sort of we had a much richer, deeper experience within these sessions, because we were not just sort of doing a step-by-step search for information. We were exploring people's sort of previous experiences. So I was able to talk to students about my own motivations for purchasing a tracker. Lots of the students themselves were wearing these Fitbits and things, so they were also able to talk about their own experiences. And it felt sort of a much richer way of sort of teaching information literacy, moving away from just locating information. So although that's very important, I wanted to emphasize that we're using this information to construct knowledge. So I mentioned how important the process of reflective practice is for my students. So this is something that I have tried sort of annually now to sort of go through my materials where possible, where I have time, review what I've done, go back to the literature or go to events like today and learn from other people, reflect on whether I need to make any changes, how can I improve my session, adapt it, develop new content. And our next workshop will be looking at sort of what factors encourage people to continue using these devices. Is it sort of what kind of person, what motivations, and maybe people like me will be reflected in the literature who are super enthusiastic for a little while and then kind of ran out of steam. I mean, I still like running, but I'm not sort of really obsessed with my Fitbit anymore. So in summary, I've given you a whistle-stop tour of the theory of informed learning and how it relates to information literacy by Christina Bruce, the importance of reflection as a strategy for bringing about learning, both my own and my students, a brief overview of the workshop outline and content, and a short reference list. And my key message here is that it wasn't just about searching for information. We wanted to go much further and think in a more creative and reflective way so that I could foster deeper learning in my sessions. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'll have chair's prerogative by starting off with my own question, I suppose, before I have a little look through the written ones in the Q&A. How you talk about the workshops that you have with the students, was that, you saw them once, or you were seeing them multiple times as part of a program or sessions throughout their program? How often did the sessions take place?
So I was seeing the students once each sort of, I guess they're not really, they're, because they're only on day release, it would be once per semester. So there would be a session on sort of referencing, but there would also be a session just before they would be researching a particular assignment. So it would then be sort of, I suppose, yeah, I think semester is probably the best way, but because they're only on campus once, one day a week. Yeah.
And do they have to do they work up to doing a bigger piece of work like a dissertation, or is it not the same model with it being an apprenticeship?
Not in this case, because this is just a 2-year foundation program, and we're hoping they will either go back into their workplace setting and or change roles, or go on to our registered nurse program.
Okay, I'm asking specifically because I suppose one of the challenges that I'm having as part of my job is a whole kind of chunks of students where traditionally they would have done a dissertation, but they seem to be latching onto a bit of a trend of doing a version of a systematic review and some of the guidance that comes with that. So I was interested as to how far they go on that path, but they're not quite up to doing that level because of the nature of the apprenticeship.
In this instance, but yes, the registered nurse program, they would be doing the dissertation.
Okay. Right, I shall switch over to questions that have come in the chat. So the first one is, have you received any feedback from students on the workshop?
Yes, we've had feedback directly from the students themselves, but also from the module leaders. And I think the sort of main takeaway for me is that people don't dread the sessions, because sometimes it is very dry content and you're using jargon like Boolean operators, or you're using, trying to convey information in a way that isn't an easy starting point. And I think it was the range of emotions people shared in the room, not always negative. It was sometimes sort of a bit of worry about these different systems and searching, and it's not a natural way of searching. So yes, it's much more fun, and people attend the sessions, in greater numbers.
And what were the numbers like? Well, how many do you have in a group? What size is the cohort?
They're very small, so they range from sort of 10 to 15, and the biggest group I've had is 25. The program is only 4 years old at Brunel.
And then we've got another question, which is, did students use this method of reflective practice in their assignments going forward?
Yes, it's part of the actual assessment. So in an awful lot of the assignments, there is a part where they have to reflect on the information they found, the intervention they used in their work setting, and how well it worked or not. So not so much about finding information, but in their actual assessments.
And then we've got a question, which is, how did you gather the feedback? I presume a mixture of module leaders, students, written, verbal, the whole lot, is it? Or
It's mostly using Poll Everywhere, because I think students find all of the evaluations quite sort of tiring, sort of from the module leaders, and it's done an awful lot. So just capturing a little bit at the beginning and the end of the session, and then in conversations, in planning new sessions with the academics, I get a lot more feedback there, but just little snapshots of feedback at the end of the session.
so what's your plans for the next time you run it? Are you changing things as it's going along? You're getting different ideas. I'm guessing that's what it sounds like.
Yes, I mean, I've got one coming up later this week with one of these cohorts from this program, and I think I'd probably like to focus a bit more on sort of the types of research, because they have to. The next assignment is finding 3 qualitative papers, and they have to then write up. So I probably will look at a bit more, sort of looking at interviews, focus groups, sort of getting more detailed information about how people feel about things. But I haven't had an opportunity yet to change it, but my plans are to look at the research a bit more to sort of see how I could do this with some of the other cohorts.
Excellent. Let me have a little glance through. I think I've covered everything in the chat. I'm sure Susie will nudge me if I've missed anything.
No, you're good, Louise.
That's great. Thank you. Well, many thanks for your time this morning. It's really interesting.
Thank you.